Hi gang, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Ed Makes, and in this episode I'll be staining paper with oil, water, and ink. So I love textures, and I'm always looking for a beautiful texture to use as a material for sculpture, decoupage, or whatever it is. And the various ways of getting that texture onto paper fascinate me, and they're really fun, and I have a lot of different ways I do this. I was studying paper marbling, and I don't have the patience for the exactness of it, but I do like the technique as a way of getting these organic textures onto paper, so I thought I would give it a try. So I took some washable markers and I squeezed out all the ink into a little cup, and I added some machine oil and suspended those particles in the machine oil. Now they're surrounded by water, these little particles, so they will separate from the oil, but it's a slow process. And when I drop this oil onto the surface of the water, of course it wants to float, and it's not touching the paper, but the pigment is migrating out of the oil. It's falling down onto the paper, and it's creating this smoky pattern that I really like, and it's soft and subtle, and I like that as well. So I'm kind of experimenting with how these two different diametric things, water and oil, they do not like one another, and pigment, and trying to get this attached to paper. So the paper underneath is soaked with water, and it's just going to resist the oil because there's so much water in it. But the dry paper, when I drop it onto the surface, will take up that oil, and the pigment will kind of get trapped up in there too. But a lot of the pigment will get pushed off to the side and will kind of surround the outside edges and migrate around it. So even though you think you're going to get that pigment on the paper the way you drop it down, it doesn't work that way. There's just all kinds of strangeness that's happening. But I do know that when you drop the paper down onto the oil that's on the water, the oil, that pattern pretty much gets a snapshot into the paper. So there's a resist layer in the dry paper that's oil, and then there's an absorbent part where the water's at that the ink wants to migrate into. So I'm creating these sandwiches of wet paper and oil paper with droplets of different colored pigment in between, like a paint Oreo, and I'm trying to get everything to just kind of mash and soak in and lock together without a lot of bleeding and migrating and things getting muddy and browning out. They're pretty much equal parts of colors that will brown out, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm trying to get it to sandwich and adhere and do what I want it to do, and I think it turned out pretty good. And in the process, I'm learning things, and I'm just taking mental notes of different aspects and different qualities of what's happening here. So I do have some experiments I'm going to perform in the future, and I hope I can get some really interesting textures out of those as well. So in the sheet that's laying on top of the water there, you can see the snapshot of the oil that was swirling around on top, and a lot of that oil has soaked into the water. It's created kind of a resistive layer, and I dropped successive sheets soaking up that oil and capturing that pattern because I want to use it when the paper dries, adding some water-based pigment to see what happens. So I can't wait for that experiment and that exercise, and I'll probably tape it and upload a video. So if you want to see a video of that, and if you want to see a video of what I do with this paper as a material, click the bell, click subscribe, be notified, and follow along and catch some really awesome stuff. And if you have subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you try this out, leave a comment below. If you have any questions, leave a comment or a question below. I try to follow as closely as possible, and chances are I will be able to reply. I really appreciate it, and until next time, guys, take care.